BT Sport have been doing an interview series called What Went Down. And you can watch these on their YouTube channel here, BT Sport Boxing. And basically, what these videos are a conference call, in this particular instance, between Steve Bunce, David Haye, and Frank Warren, in which they discuss and reveal insights surrounding particular fights. For this video, it was David Haye, Enzo Maccarinelli. So Haye and Warren are revealing what went down in the lead up to the fight. David Haye talking about training camp, his mindset, tactics, all that kind of stuff, and then the fight itself. And they show footage of the fight, and David Haye's, talking about what he was feeling at certain moments during the fight and why he was doing certain things. There's also this one with Adam Booth, where they talk about the Jean-Marc Mormec fight. Now, this video in particular was very pleasing to watch because of the fact that David Haye and Adam Booth haven't been seen together talking since they broke up as fighter and trainer. Now, in this video, from what I can remember of it, I saw it a few days ago, they don't talk to each other directly. They have Steve Bunce, who's kind of asking them both questions, but they are on the same conference call. And it's just good to see that they're collaborating on something like this. Perhaps we'll get more collaborations between David Haye and Adam Booth in the coming months or years. Because when Haye was still with Adam Booth, they seemed like a very, very tight unit. And not just David Haye, even George Groves. They had this smugness about them. They had this aloofness about them, whereby they gave off the impression that they knew something that the audience didn't know, like something important that the audience didn't know, or that the interviewer didn't know, or that the opponents didn't know. They always tried to give off this aura, or whether it was intentional or unintentional, they gave off this aura of, we're smarter than you and we know things that you don't know. Now, some people found that to be very annoying. I personally found it to be very entertaining. I liked the Haymaker team smugness, at least most of the time. Sometimes it would drive me crazy when they were specifically talking about certain fighters, because there was a period in David Haye's career where he was avoiding Vladimir Klitschko and Vitaly Klitschko. Right? There was a certain period where he was doing that. But for the most part, I enjoyed the smugness. Now, when David Haye first moved up to heavyweight, I was constantly pointing out to people that he's not a real heavyweight. Because I was skeptical. There was a lot of people at the time saying that David Haye is going to move up and smash both Klitschko's to pieces and all this kind of stuff. Even after he beat Valuev, there was a lot of people saying this. And I was always skeptical about David Haye's chances against the Klitschkos. And one of the things I always used to say is that David Haye's not a real heavyweight. He's a blown up cruiserweight, and he wasn't even a particularly big cruiserweight. He was pumping weights even at cruiserweight, to bulk himself up to 200 pounds. And I got so much stick and backlash for saying stuff like that. But in this interview, well, it's in one of these interviews, David Haye finally confirms that he wasn't struggling at cruiserweight at all. I mean, I knew this all along anyway, because I knew for a fact that David Haye, even at cruiserweight, was pumping loads of weights. Yeah, and if you're lifting loads of weights at cruiserweight, that means you're putting on muscle. If you're really struggling to make weight, you're not going to do anything that is going to put excess mass on you. You're going to cut out the weight training. You're going to, not just in terms of putting on fat, but putting on muscle. You're not going to try and put on any excess weight if you're really struggling, to make a particular weight class. So David Haye was never struggling to make the weight. In these interviews, he admits it. He also admits that in the Mormec fight, when he got dropped, that wasn't due to being weight drained. It was just due to it being a good shot. He said that basically he and Adam Booth invented this myth that he was struggling at the weight and that's why the Mormec knockdown happened. They invented that myth to try and draw Enzo Maccarinelli in his next fight into a false sense of security. They wanted Maccarinelli to think he was struggling at the weight. Yeah? This is what David Haye says here. So I know it's a very trivial matter, and it's many, many years after the fact. But finally, I'm exonerated for saying David Haye was never struggling at cruiserweight. And one of the things I used to say back then is that for selfish reasons as a boxing fan, I kind of wish David Haye had stayed at cruiserweight rather than moving up to heavyweight, because there were some good fights to be had there. I understand his reasons for moving up. At the end of the day, he always wanted to be heavyweight champion, not cruiserweight champion. That was his ambition since he was a young boy. And also at heavyweight, there's a hell of a lot more money to be made. There's a lot more prestige in being heavyweight champion rather than being cruiserweight champion. So I get it. I don't hate David Haye or anything like that for not staying at cruiserweight. But just selfishly as a boxing fan, I would have liked to have seen him stay at that weight for a bit longer and fight the likes of Steve Cunningham and some other guys as well. Because if you're talking about David Haye's achievements, he achieved a lot in boxing. You know, he's done a lot in his life and done really well for himself. But the likes of Alexander Usyk and Evander Holyfield are above David Haye in the pantheon of great cruiserweight champions. In fact, you might put some other cruiserweights who are maybe less well known, but established themselves more and longer at cruiserweight than David Haye. Yeah, there's definitely an argument to be made that there are other cruiserweight champions you could put above David Haye. So David Haye was a high-profile fighter, made a lot of money, but in terms of what he actually achieved on paper, maybe he underachieved a little bit at cruiserweight. Anyway, in these particular videos, there's a lot of insights, a lot of interesting things are said, and with regards to the strategy that David Haye used in the Mormek fight, it was quite interesting. Adam Booth described David Haye as low energy and heavy-handed. And he said that the strategy in the Mormek fight was to slow the pace down, because certain fighters like to fight at a slower pace. David Haye's one of them. Slow the pace down and basically make Mormek have to exert a lot of energy and a lot of, not just physical energy, but mental energy, trying to get past David Haye's low volume heavy-handedness, as Booth describes it. And so after a few rounds of doing that, obviously he dropped David Haye in the fourth round, but after a few rounds of doing that and David Haye hitting Mormek to the body, in fact, the Mormek fight is still my favorite ever David Haye performance. Even though he got dropped, he came back from that and battled back and stopped Mormek a few rounds later. But I just feel like every tool that David Haye had in his arsenal was used in that fight, including body shots, which we very rarely saw in David Haye's career before or after. In the Mormek fight, he threw really good body punches, broke Mormek down. And yeah, they explained that the strategy was, let's say, to kind of draw Mormek's sting a little bit without exerting too much energy. And then in the seventh round, David Haye still had plenty. I think it was the seventh round where he stopped Mormek. Correct me if I'm wrong. David Haye still had plenty left in the gas tank. So when he hit Mormek and realized he buzzed him, he just opened up and he had 100% power still available for him to use with his power punches. And when he opened up, Mormek could not take what David Haye was dishing out. Down Mormek went. He did get up, but the fight was rightly, waved off because Mormek was in no fit state to continue. Great performance by David Haye, an underrated performance. That's what some people are saying in the comment section. An underrated performance on the road by a British fighter, and it really was, because this was in Mormek's backyard. This was a reigning champion. This was a guy who, been at the top a good while. Hostile territory for David Haye. They weren't trying to do him any favors over there. And David Haye went there, came back from adversity, the knockdown, drew Mormek's sting, and finished the fight conclusively. So I thought it was a great performance by David Haye. For me, still my favorite David Haye performance. And I highly recommend this video with Adam Booth in terms of hearing more insight into what went on behind the scenes and the lead up to the fight and during the fight itself. Another thing that Adam Booth said, because he's somebody who's very interested in psychology, and I've always rated his ability to assess the psychology of fighters. But another thing he says here is that him and David Haye were criticized by the boxing establishment in the UK for being these young upstarts who were very confident, but they hadn't really had much experience, and therefore they shouldn't be as confident as they are. They were very criticized for doing things in an unconventional fashion. I was very critical of many of the things that Adam Booth did back then. But Adam Booth revealed the importance of self-confidence because they believed in what they were doing, irrespective of how little experience they had. They just were bloody-minded and stubborn and believed in what they were doing. And that, along with David Haye's talent, and obviously Adam Booth's talents as a trainer and a strategist, took them through to tremendous success. So, yes, experience is very important. But if you've got the right talent and you've got the requisite level of self-belief, you can sometimes trump experience. Just with that youthful, confidence, bloody-minded self-belief, you can just sometimes overcome all kinds of odds. Fighting away from home, lack of experience. Remember, David Haye had been stopped by Carl Thompson a couple years prior. And that wasn't away from home. That wasn't against the reigning world champion. That was against the Carl Thompson who'd really seen better days. A 40-year-old man. So there was every reason on paper for David Haye to lose to Jean-Marc Mormec. But he went over there and, turned Mormec over and became cruiserweight champion of the world and unified against Macronelli. I don't think it was the next fight, was it? Didn't he fight Bonin in between the Mormec and This was definitely the next cruiserweight fight, but I think he fought at heavyweight against Thomas Bonin after the Mormec fight and before the Macronelli fight. But either way, he then unified against Macronelli, and then after that relinquished and moved up to heavyweight, and the rest is history. But I highly recommend these What Went Down videos on the BT Sport Boxing YouTube channel. There's also one with David Haye and Derek Chisora talking about what went down in the lead up to their fight. It's a bit awkward in that interview because, these two guys are friends now and fighter and manager, but they're talking about a time when David Haye smashed Derek Chisora to pieces. Both in that press conference in Germany and also in the ring. And at one point, Derek Chisora's pride gets the best of him and he says, if I fought David Haye now, I'd knock him out in one round. And what Derek Chisora was talking about is if the version of himself had fought the version of David Haye back then, he would have knocked David Haye out in one round. That's basically what he was saying. And David Haye kind of said, I'm not sure about that. You might knock me out in one round now, the version of me now in 2020, but not me back in whenever it was, 2012, 2013, when he fought Chisora. The version of you now it would have been more difficult for me back then to fight the version of you are now, but, I think it still would have gone the same way. So it's kind of just awkward and funny watching the pair of them still have that little bit of rivalry. You can tell that fight gets to Derek Chisora even now, And that is apparently the first time he's actually watched the fight with Steve Bunce and David Haye. So, yeah, it's a hell of a thing. Obviously, Derek Chisora says he doesn't normally watch his own fights, but I'm sure he's watched some of them. He probably doesn't watch his own losses. That might be more accurate. And it's a painful thing to see yourself get leveled the way Derek Chisora was leveled in the David Haye fight. It hurts the pride, particularly for a warrior like Derek Chisora. You don't want to see yourself get smashed to bits like that, both in the press conference fight and then in the ring. That's a hard thing for a man to take. It's a hard thing for his pride to absorb. But Derek Chisora is a fighting man, and being a fighting man is not just having the ability to actually fight, but it's having the ability to absorb an L and come back from it. Rebuild your confidence, which Derek Chisora has done time and time again. And I really commend him for it because I've written him off several times and he's come back and proved me wrong. So yeah, highly recommend these BT Sport Boxing What Went Down episodes. Check them out on their YouTube channel. Let me know what you think, and let me know, tell me some of your favorite moments from these videos, or some of the insights that I maybe forgot to mention. I might actually watch these episodes again because they were really interesting, particularly the one with Adam Booth talking about, the strategy and the psychological approach and all that kind of stuff behind the scenes. But even the Enzo Maccarinelli fight as well, very, very interesting. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. It's happening, I'm out. Join me on Patreon. I upload a minimum of 2 podcasts every single week, covering a wide variety of controversial topics, as well as live stream Q&A sessions. Take a look on screen right now at some of the podcasts I've produced so far. For just $3 a month, the equivalent of about £2 a month, you get access to all my new podcasts and my entire back catalogue of past podcasts, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen on your computer or on your smartphone or tablet by downloading the Patreon app from the Google Play Store or the App Store for free. The Patreon app also allows you to download each podcast in MP3. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, you get access to dozens of hours of exclusive content. It's easy to sign up, there's no contract, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.